So today I'm going to talk to you about why I bought a bus, which is why I brought you to the boatyard to talk about buses. Well, I'm really just in the boatyard because it's on the way to the dock or the pier that I'm going to go do this on, and the reason I'm doing this intro here is because the background's nice. I don't have bright sun on my face. I look maybe a little bit better, and you get a better view of what's going on in my day. And I love boats and 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 boats. So I came out to the dock because there's lots of interesting things out here. There's seagulls, and there's seagulls, and there's more seagulls you might see flying around in the background. And that guy took off, but I came out here because there's boats. I'm near boats. So we're here on a dock, not too far, maybe 100 feet from, or 100 yards from the where the boats are down there. We're here on the dock, and I'm going to try and find a nice spot where I can be seen and not be a silhouette like you see that dock being, because the sun's back there. Now the reason we came out to a dock to talk to you, why I came to a dock to talk to you about a bus, is because the first thing I wanted to do was buy a boat. 30 feet, something like that, that I could live on comfortably, maybe have other people come with me, but the plan was to buy the boat, sail around this nice beautiful area until I got down to the Sea of Cortez. And then I had figured I could spend a few months down there, then come back to Canada where it's chilly, but I could spend the summer here again. Oh, then I realized that I could buy myself the vehicle, and that would be all I would need for the moment, and I could drive it down to Mexico, and I could buy or rent boats when I was down there. So that kind of eliminated my need to buy a boat here and spend the summer in it, so I decided I would buy a vehicle. Now I had a few other issues to deal with because I needed to find out or figure out which vehicle to buy. So I went out and started looking on Craigslist and other places, looking for vans. The first intent was to look for a van, a high topper. The next was to consider a motorhome maybe. And the next was, then I basically ran into Grumman trucks, like a bread truck or a UPS truck. Then I decided, well, those are cool. And then in one of my searches, I ran into a school bus. And I thought, well, that's like too hippie-ish. I don't want to do that. And it's too obvious, and etc. So I kind of just put it aside. Then, after deciding that buses weren't really my cup of tea, I settled on a Grumman. And the reason I decided I would try and find a Grumman bus, like the bread bus, is because it's got square corners in it, and I can just go to IKEA and buy furniture and stick it in. It wouldn't require me to make any cuts or any changes to what was there. I could probably just put cabinets in and hang them on the wall, etc., and would be able to simply build out into a livable space much more easily. And then I began to look at the price of a Grumman truck. And because they're made of aluminum and last forever, or more or less forever, they don't rust, etc., the bodies are worth a lot of money. And all that's ever needed to keep those things running for a century is maybe a new motor, depending on how well it was looked after, etc. So that there was no new technology in those. They're just simply an old truck and an old bus, and they were also very expensive given their age and the amount of maintenance I might have to do. So then I went and looked at Grumman trucks. Then I got in one, and I went like, oh my God, this is a ridiculous amount of work to clean this thing up and make it acceptable in terms of a living space. I obviously had to do a lot of work on the floor, and the front cab area was ridiculous in the sense that it was designed in the 50s, and most Grumman trucks would look like that. I know they really haven't changed very much. And it was noisy as hell when it started up. It was extremely noisy inside the vehicle. And then I realized it also is sort of claustrophobic. It has no windows. But I'm 6'1", and in the one that I was looking at, I could just stand up, so it wasn't a whole lot of headroom. But it did have the room that I thought it did in the box, and so it wasn't that terrible, and I hadn't given up on them. I just thought, nah. So I decided then that I didn't decide right in all at once, but essentially I went and looked at a few motorhomes and decided that I'm just buying somebody else's germs and dirt and all that kind of crap. And the stuff that was inside it was all 1990s or something. I mean, it was all dated. The whole point is it was all dated, and I was always concerned about mildew and things like that in the wood. So now I had eliminated motorhomes, not entirely, but I had eliminated them because they were twice the price of a high-top van, and a high-top van was still a reasonably priced option. But the Grumman both the motorhome and the Grumman were at least double the price of all the high-top vans I could find in the same vintage, more or less the same mileage, etc. So I looked at high-top vans, and they were basically every single one I could find was an entire wreck, or it had how would I put it, too much work life in it, and lots of mileage, and still a very high price given the age of it. And so I was really afraid of the age of the vehicles and things like that. So then I ran into a bus on YouTube, a Schoolie they call it. So when I saw what they could do inside the Schoolie, I realized that my concerns about a square top were not that important. All I really needed was things on the floor or against the wall. So I amazingly had not seen any for sale, but I went into Craigslist and said, just simply put in the search, I put in bus, and up came a bunch of kids' toys and some buses for sale. Well, I ended up buying a bus that came from a company that had been driving it for the last 20 years to take kids. So I figured, well, it's more likely that a bus company looks after their bus than some guy that's a plumber or whatever. It's more likely he did a good job looking after his bus because he had to have it inspected every year for the last 20 years. And so now I found the bus, and I found the seller. I found the perfect kind of scenario at a price I could afford, and the strangest thing is that I thought I was taking a big risk buying something that everybody would see and go, oh, there's some hippie living in that bus, they must be some scumbag. Well, the fact is that businessmen would stop and talk to me and say, this is really awesome. I'd be parked in any place in any city because the bus is short, it's only 20 feet. So I was able to park just about anywhere, and might be sitting there having my coffee. And while I'm having my coffee, people would come by from all kinds of situations in their life and be like, gee, I wish I could buy a bus like this. This is the coolest thing. Well, I don't really think it's cool. It's just an opportunity to get out of my apartment and travel, primarily because I could not travel and have a home at the same time. So that's the story about how a guy starts out wanting a boat or a motorhome or a high-top van or a Grumman type van and ends up with a school bus. like to wake up to this kind of thing. It's actually the early afternoon, but this is basically what I wake up to, minus the people. Just a beat. Well, I went for a walk, and maybe I'll give you an image of, or a sample of how most people see me. Most of the day I'm just sitting on a park bench like this and enjoying a view like that. So introducing my bus. We are going to call it, put something on the side. After we put the solar panels on the roof, we're going to put something on the side called Gus Bus or Bus Gus or something like that. And my bus is pretty simple. It's a little short school bus that I took the time to paint silver because I was told when I go to California I won't be able to, or I'll get a ticket. The moral of this story is not to convince everybody to buy a bus. There's certainly a lot of other options for everybody, and there's no need to have big space. There's no need to have a tall roof unless you're older like me with a bad back, and tall with a bad back is not a good idea in a little van. But I have friends that are living in minivans, and they've been living in the minivan for years. They don't have any problem. I've even seen two people in a minivan. So any option will be dependent on what your needs are and what your goals are. I simply wanted something that would allow me to travel from A to B, carry the stuff that I personally need, and keep me as comfortable as possible. And so my bus has managed to do that. The other thing is that basically I went through the process to try to kind of explain that I wanted to go travel. The first concept was a boat. That wasn't going to work, so I looked at many other options until I found something that would work for me to travel. I didn't have to give up the goal. I could just keep changing the way in which I achieved my goal to meet the needs, or at least the idea that I have in mind. I also can sell my bus, buy another vehicle, or move back to an apartment. I don't have to make decisions that last for the rest of my life. None of this stuff is permanent necessarily, and can certainly be treated as a temporary thing. It's just like the inside of the bus, the work that I've done inside. I could decide to change that at any moment and just rip it all out and put in a new setup. So nothing stays permanent. I just keep trying different options, and my life is kind of like this movie. I can edit anything into it and anything out of it whenever I feel like. So if you're feeling like you might want to try this lifestyle, try it. It's not it's not a decision that has to last the rest of your life, and it's not going to hurt you, nor is it going to make your life wonderful. It's just going to make it different.